Hi, this is Imare from the Always Uttori blog, where we empower you to bring enchantment into your life through fashion, food, DIYs, and lifestyle content. Today, we're continuing our 2024 holiday celebration with 3 delicious desserts inspired by our Goth Rococo color theme. If you'd like to learn more about the Et Le Mystique Goth Rococo theme, check out our Jumpstart Christmas 2024 and Goth Rococo DIY videos, both linked in the description box below. Our Et Le Mystique dessert menu includes Délice de Cajou macarons in chocolate espresso royale and white chocolate raspberry flavors, a Marquis de Berry tartlet, and éclairs in cereal milk and lemon strawberry rose jam flavors. And to finish, we'll be sharing a recipe for rose tea. Let's cook some enchantment. We're starting things off with our Délice de Cajou macarons, which are made with cashew flour instead of the traditional almond flour. First up, we'll make our 2 ganache fillings. For our chocolate espresso ganache, finely chop 4 ounces of dark chocolate and place it in a heat-proof bowl. Add 2 teaspoons of espresso powder, add more for a stronger coffee flavor. Heat 1/2 cup of cream until it's warm, about 1 to 2 minutes in the microwave, or until bubbles form around the edges if heating on the stove. Pour the warm cream over the chocolate and let it sit for a minute to melt, then stir until smooth and glossy. Once combined, add 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter and mix until fully incorporated. Transfer the ganache to a piping bag and chill in the fridge until ready to use. For our white chocolate ganache, finely chop 6 ounces of white chocolate and place it in a heat-proof bowl. Heat 1/3 cup of cream until warm and pour over the chocolate, letting it sit for a minute before stirring. Once the ganache is smooth and shiny, transfer it to a piping bag and chill in the fridge until ready to use. Next, let's make the macaron shells. Start by grinding 200 grams of unsalted cashews, about 1 3/4 cups, into a fine powder. You can also buy pre-ground cashew flour, but it's easy to make in a high-speed blender. Just be careful not to overblend or it may turn into cashew butter. Once ground, sift the cashew flour into a large bowl. Sift 200 grams, about 2 cups, of powdered sugar into the same bowl. Ideally, the flour to sugar ratio should be equal, but when grinding your own flour, you may get a slightly lower yield. I ended up with about 129 grams of cashew flour, so I adjusted the powdered sugar to match. A little extra sugar won't affect the recipe significantly if the ratios are close. Add 3 egg whites, about 73 grams, to the cashew flour and sugar mixture. Mix until combined, then set aside. Next, we're making a meringue. We'll use the Italian method, which tends to be more stable and results in less error than the French macarons, giving a crispier shell with a rounder top. 1 or 2 days before making the macarons, leave 3 eggs out at room temperature to age the egg whites. This helps the proteins break down for better whipping. If you prefer not to leave eggs out, you can separate the egg whites and store them in the fridge for up to a week. Just bring them to room temperature before whipping. Place the 3 aged egg whites in a stand mixer with the whisk attachment and set aside. In a small saucepan, combine 100 grams, about 1/2 cup of sugar, and 50 grams, about 1/4 cup of water, heating over medium-high until it reaches a boil. Let the mixture heat to 235 degrees Fahrenheit on a candy thermometer. When it reaches this temperature, start whipping the egg whites in the mixer. Keep an eye on the syrup, and when it reaches 244 degrees Fahrenheit, remove it from the heat. With the mixer on medium-low, slowly pour the hot syrup into the egg whites, then continue to whip on high until the meringue is cool to the touch, about 5 minutes. Since I'm making 2 flavors, I divided the meringue and cashew paste evenly into 4 bowls. Now is the best time to add food coloring to the meringue. Adding color at this stage gives a richer, more even result. I forgot to do this for the chocolate espresso flavor and had to add it during the folding stage, which didn't blend as well and resulted in a gray instead of black color. Next, gently fold the meringue into the cashew paste a small amount at a time. This process is called macaronage. Fold around the edge of the bowl and then cut through the center a few times, adding more meringue gradually. Continue folding until the batter reaches a smooth lava-like consistency. To test, let a ribbon of batter fall back into the bowl. It should reincorporate within 10 to 15 seconds. Prepare a baking sheet with parchment paper or a silicone mat, and preheat the oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, or 150 degrees Celsius. If you don't have a macaron template, you can freehand the circles or draw guides on the back of the parchment paper. Transfer the batter to a piping bag fitted with a round tip. Pipe by holding the bag straight down, applying pressure to form a small mound. Stop applying pressure, then swivel your wrist to release cleanly. After piping, let the macarons sit for 20 to 30 minutes or until a skin forms on the top. Bake for 15 to 18 minutes, then allow them to cool completely before removing from the parchment paper. Now for the fun part, assembling the macarons. First, match up the macaron shells into pairs of similar size. Let the ganache warm up a bit before piping, as it can be too firm to pipe when cold. For the chocolate espresso macarons, pipe the chocolate ganache onto one macaron shell, then add the second shell on top, pressing and twisting slightly to secure. For the white chocolate raspberry macarons, add a small dollop of raspberry jam in the center of one shell. I use store-bought jam for convenience. Pipe the white chocolate ganache around the jam, then top with the second shell, pressing and twisting to secure. Macarons are always a tasty treat, but the cashews add a buttery, slightly sweeter flavor than traditional almond-based macarons. I personally love using cashews since I have an almond allergy, so if you know someone with a nut allergy, try experimenting with different types of nuts. Macaron shells are surprisingly adaptable. Hazelnuts and pistachios are popular alternatives. The coffee and raspberry flavors here are subtle, but they balance the sweetness of the shells nicely. Needless to say, these didn't last long in my house. While you can eat the macarons right away, they actually improve with age. If you're planning a party, macarons are a perfect make-ahead dessert. Store them in an airtight container in the refrigerator for at least 24 hours and up to a week. Next up is our Marquis de Berry tartlet. We'll start by making a berry compote. You'll need 2 cups of fresh or frozen berries. I used a mix of strawberries, blueberries, and blackberries. If using fresh berries, cut them into smaller pieces to help them break down more quickly. Place the berries in a small saucepan with 1/4 cup of sugar and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Cook over medium heat, stirring occasionally until the mixture begins to thicken, about 10 minutes. It can be hard to judge the consistency while the compote is hot, and it will continue to thicken as it cools. To test, drop a bit of the liquid onto a plate. It should move slightly but still hold its shape. We're aiming for a texture that won't spill when added to the tart later. Once the compote reaches the desired consistency, cover it with plastic wrap and store it in the fridge until ready to use. Now let's make the tart shell. This is quick and easy to do in a food processor, but you can also mix by hand using a fork or pastry cutter. In a bowl or food processor, combine 250 grams of flour, 50 grams of powdered sugar, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Mix to combine. Add 1 cup of diced, cold, unsalted butter to the flour mixture, incorporating it in stages, 1/2 cup at a time, mixing between each addition. If mixing by hand, use a fork, pastry cutter, or your fingers to combine. The dough should look coarse and crumbly. In a small bowl, whisk together 2 egg yolks, the seeds of 1 vanilla bean, or 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 2 tablespoons of cold water. Pour the egg mixture into the flour mixture and mix until the dough begins to come together. If it's too dry, add an additional tablespoon of cold water. Turn the dough onto a lightly floured surface or a sheet of parchment paper and knead until it comes together. A pastry scraper is helpful for sticky dough. Divide the dough in half and form each half into a rectangular disc, which makes rolling out easier later. Wrap each disc in plastic wrap and refrigerate for at least 1 hour. While the dough is chilling, make the cream cheese filling. In In a stand mixer, combine 8 ounces of cream cheese, 1/4 cup of powdered sugar, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. For a less tangy and loose filling, you can substitute with mascarpone cheese. Mix until smooth, then transfer to a piping bag and refrigerate until ready to use. After the dough has chilled, preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 degrees Celsius. Place 1 dough disc on a lightly floured surface or parchment paper. Place a piece of plastic wrap over the dough to help with rolling, minimizing contact to prevent the butter from melting. Roll the dough to about 1/8 inch thick, pressing down first if it's too cold to roll easily. Use a round cutter to cut out circles of dough large enough to fit in your tartlet pans. Spray the tartlet pans with cooking spray, making sure the dough gets into the corners and dips of the pan. Trim excess dough with a knife or press it into the edges of the pan so it detaches cleanly. If the dough becomes too warm, place it in the freezer for a few minutes to firm up. For any tears or thin spots, press in extra dough, using your fingers to melt it smoothly. Prick the bottoms of the tartlets with a fork and place the tarts on a baking sheet. Optionally, you can place a piece of parchment paper inside each shell and fill with baking weights to prevent puffing. However, the fork prick should allow enough steam to escape. I skipped the weights and baked the shells for about 25 minutes. Anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes should work, depending on your oven. The tart shells should be a golden brown when done. Let them cool completely before filling. To assemble the tarts, pipe the whipped cream cheese topping into each tart shell. Spoon the berry compote over the cream cheese, making sure it's fully covered. Try to avoid spilling the compote over the edge, but if any does spill, gently wipe it up with a paper towel for a clean presentation. I think a small piece of edible gold leaf on top would look stunning. I had some, but unfortunately couldn't find it in time for filming. It would definitely take the presentation to the next level. If you're making these for a party, you can definitely prepare the elements ahead of time. The compote can be made up to a week in advance, and the tart shells can be stored in the freezer as unbaked dough or baked and kept in an airtight container for a few days. Assemble the tarts on the day of the event for the best texture. Fully assembled, they'll stay fresh for a day or two, but they may lose some shine and get slightly soggy. You'll see in the final shots of this video how they look on day 2. Flavor-wise, this was my favorite dessert of the 3. I'm not usually a big fan of tarts, but the shell was buttery, crisp, and not at all dry like some tart shells can be. And honestly, you can't go wrong with cream cheese and fruit. Next up, we're making the Empress's Éclairs in 2 flavors, lemon strawberry rose jam and cereal milk. Starting with the rose jam, chop 2 cups of strawberries. You can use fresh or frozen strawberries. If they are frozen, you may want to defrost them and cut them a bit smaller, as we will need to pipe this jam, so any big chunks may get stuck when piping. Place the strawberries, 1 cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of rose petals, 1/4 cup of lemon juice, and the zest of 1 lemon into a medium pot. To cook, bring the mixture to a boil over medium-high heat, stirring occasionally to dissolve the sugar. Once boiling, reduce the heat to medium and let simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes, stirring frequently until it reaches your desired consistency. I've added mine to a jam maker which cooks it in 30-minute increments. I usually have to do a few cycles to get it to the consistency I want, but it's a helpful alternative if you don't want to stand over the pot stirring. Once the jam is cooked, you can stir in 1/2 teaspoon of rose water for enhanced rose flavor, but it's up to your taste preference. You can store this jam in a sterilized mason jar for up to a month or transfer it to a bowl if you plan to use it soon. Let it cool to room temperature, then refrigerate until ready to use. By the way, this jam makes a wonderful holiday gift. Next up is the cereal milk pastry cream, inspired by the cereal milk pudding I made last year for our fun festy holiday theme. If you missed that video, I'll link it in the description box. Pour 2 cups of whole milk and 1 cup of your cereal of choice. I used Fruity Pebbles, into a large bowl. Let the milk infuse for 20 to 30 minutes. Strain the milk through a fine mesh sieve into a clean bowl, pressing down onto the cereal to extract as much milk as possible, then discard the cereal. For this recipe, we'll only need 1 cup of the cereal milk for the pastry cream, but I infused extra to ensure there was enough, as the amount absorbed varies depending on the cereal. You can enjoy the remaining cereal milk as a treat or use it in place of plain milk in the choux pastry. Based on my testing, it doesn't noticeably affect the flavor. In a medium pot, heat 1 cup of the cereal milk over medium heat until it just begins to simmer. Meanwhile, in a separate bowl, whisk together 1/4 cup sugar, 2 egg yolks, and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch until smooth. Slowly pour a small amount of the hot cereal milk into the egg mixture, stirring to temper the eggs. Return the mixture to the saucepan and cook over medium heat, stirring constantly until it thickens and comes to a boil. Let it boil for 1 to 2 minutes, then remove it from the heat. Add any desired food coloring. I used blue to match our color theme. Strain the pastry cream into a bowl, cover with plastic wrap, pressing it directly onto the surface to prevent a skin from forming, and chill it in the refrigerator until ready to use. To make the choux pastry, preheat the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 degrees Celsius, and line a baking sheet with parchment paper or a silicone mat. Set up a stand mixer with the paddle attachment near the stovetop so it's ready for the dough transfer. You can also mix by hand, but a mixer makes the process much easier. In a medium saucepan, combine 1 cup of milk or leftover cereal milk, 1/2 cup of unsalted butter, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Heat over medium heat until the butter melts and the mixture just begins to simmer. Remove the pan from the heat and add all the flour at once, stirring vigorously until the mixture forms a ball and pulls away from the sides of the pan. Transfer the dough to the stand mixer and mix on low speed to release steam and cool slightly. If you're mixing by hand, let the dough cool for a few minutes before the next step. Add 4 eggs, 1 at a time, mixing well after each addition until the dough is smooth and glossy. Transfer the dough to a piping bag fitted with a large round tip. Pipe 3 to 4 inch strips onto the prepared baking sheet, spacing them about 2 inches apart. If you're using parchment paper instead of a silicone mat, you may find it helpful to pipe some batter in the 4 corners of the pan so the parchment paper won't move while you pipe. Once you've finished, you can wet a finger with water and gently press down any humps or fix any misshapen eclairs. Bake for 10 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, then reduce the temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius, and bake for an additional 20 to 25 minutes until the eclairs are puffed and golden brown. Let cool completely on a wire rack. To make the glaze for the eclairs, prepare 2 bowls and sift 1/2 cup of powdered sugar into each bowl. In the first bowl, add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice and a few drops of blue food coloring, stirring to combine. In the second bowl, add 1 tablespoon of rose water and a few drops of pink food coloring, stirring until smooth. Set both glazes aside until ready to use. To assemble the eclairs, start by poking a small hole in the bottom. I found that making 2 holes, 1 on each end, worked best for even filling. Transfer the lemon strawberry rose jam into a piping bag fitted with a small round tip. Pipe the jam into each eclair until filled, using both holes for an even distribution. Repeat the process with the cereal milk pastry cream. For the glaze, spoon it over the top of each eclair. I tried piping it at first but found spooning was easier. For an extra decorative touch, add a bit of cereal and rosebuds or petals, pressing them gently into the glaze before it sets. Eclairs are best enjoyed the same day they're assembled, though you can prepare the components in advance. If you do make them ahead, I recommend crisping the eclairs in the oven for a few minutes before filling, as they're meant to have a slightly crisp texture. Surprisingly, I found myself liking the lemon strawberry rose jam filling even more than the cereal milk, though both flavors turned out delicious, and they pair perfectly with tea. Speaking of tea, our final recipe is a rose tea to perfectly accompany the desserts. While a store-bought blend works well, you can go the extra mile by creating your own unique blend. In a large bowl, combine 4.5 tablespoons of dried rose petals, 4.5 tablespoons of dried rose hips, 2 1/4 tablespoons of dried hibiscus, and the zest of 1 lemon. For natural sweetness, you can add 6 to 7 dates as well. Pour 8 cups of boiling water over the mixture and let infuse for 10 to 15 minutes. Strain the tea and reheat if needed, then transfer it to a teapot. If you happen to have a silver teapot, that would complement the Rococo theme well. Silver teapots were popular at the time and are said to have benefits like antibacterial properties and retaining heat longer. I found mine while thrifting. Serve this fragrant tea alongside the other desserts. And here's everything displayed together. As I mentioned before, assembled tarts and éclairs are best enjoyed the same day. I'm on day 2 of filming, and the tarts lost a bit of shine as the liquid got absorbed, while the icing on the éclairs softened. But I still wanted to show you how everything looks together in the space I've decorated. If you'd like to see me decorate this setup, make sure you're subscribed, as the next video will be the grand finale for our Goth Rococo Christmas theme. With that, thank you so much for watching, and remember, enchantment awaits. Life is just about finding it.